So today we're working on a 2014 Acura RDX, and we are just going to be replacing the passenger side axle. So I'm just doing some other work on this vehicle, like brakes and stuff. So this axle, we're replacing it because it's leaking grease. So the boot is completely split open. So we are going to be replacing this. Now this one has a intermediate shaft that runs in the middle, all the way in the back here. That goes into the transmission. It's leaking a little bit here. I told the customer that we need to replace the output shaft seal or the axle seal, but they don't want to replace it at this moment. It's just a slight seepage, so we are just going to wash that down. Now the intermediate shaft, I think they also call it a jack shaft or something like that. There's a carrier bearing that's in between there. So if the carrier bearing is noisy on yours, then you probably have to replace the axle and also the intermediate shaft. They come in two separate pieces. The intermediate shaft comes with the bearing. So now I'm just going to be removing the axle nut. Since the axle is not going to be reused, you don't need to unstake the axle nut because the axle is going in the garbage. So this is a 36 millimeter half drive socket. I'm going to see if we can get this axle free. You can use a punch or an air hammer or something. The shop doesn't really have an air compressor at the moment. We just opened up the shop, so I started here about like a week or two ago. So we don't have any air tools at the moment. Usually I just use the air hammer and to go inside to free the axle nut. In some cases you may need to heat it up a tiny bit and be able to get it free, but if you have to heat it up too much, then you probably have to replace the wheel bearing. So I'm going to try to get that free by using a chisel or a punch or something. Trying to see if I can get this free. It's already loose. So it's loose, it's free now, so we don't need to worry about that. I'm gonna bring the hoist up a little bit and we will remove the lower ball joint nut. So anyhow, we're just going to remove these three. I was not supposed to remove the top one because it's easier to remove these instead. These are all 17 millimeters each. The two nuts and the one bolt. And then you just need to pull down on the control arm and get this out of the way, and then the axle should be able to slide out. You should be able to just slide out this axle out of the way without disturbing anything else. So I just have the axle, it's resting on the control arm now, so I just need to pry it out from the transmission side. And now I don't think you need to worry about draining the differential or the transmission fluid on this, because I'm just replacing this part of the axle, so no fluid should come out of here on this side. But if you're doing the driver's side, you probably want to drain the front differential and or transfer case first before you take the axle out, depending on how the system is connected. On some cars, you need to drain the transmission a tiny bit and or the differential, but you don't need to do it, but some fluid will come out when you are removing the axle, so it's up to you if you want to drain the fluid beforehand or not. So it's just that so that you don't make a huge mess, but you don't have to do it. So now I'm just gonna try to pry on the axle here, try to pry out. There's like a bracket piece here which I can pry against, but you need to be careful. Just trying to see if I can pry here gently without damaging anything. Being careful to not, like, you know, damage the exhaust components or anything. Alternatively, you can use like a long punch or something to hit in the back here. I do have some axle popper tools as well that could help. You can try using an axle popper tool, and sometimes that works on some of the vehicles. They look like tuning forks or something like that. Get it in between here. It's coming out a little bit small here, so you can see there's a gap in between. I am hitting it against the exhaust shield, but there isn't really a spot to pry against, so I'm just trying to do that carefully. So just trying to put the fork here and just doing this until it comes up. And trying to push this way too at the same time, if you're able to. We'll see if maybe I can use a pry bar in the back and try to push against here. See if that works. So now it's out. You just need to get it out of here, and then and that's it. I'm still waiting for the new parts to show up. The new parts are not here yet. So if you're having a hard time in trying to get the axle out, the trick is to place a pry bar in between the exhaust over here, either this way or this way. Get in there, and then and just tap with the hammer. Just keep on tapping in the back with the hammer, and you should be able to get it out. So everything is free now. Probably going to just maybe to clean it and to wipe down the splines over here. And I think that seal, you can change that seal if you want, if it's not leaking, but it's recommended to replace the seal at the same time. I personally always replace all of the seals if possible, but we're not replacing the seals on this one. So here's the old part. This is all split open. So I just I pry it in the back here, and just use a pry bar and a hammer, and you should be able to get it out. This is fairly a little bit of a rusty car, but the camera it doesn't do that much justice over here. But that's all there is to it at the moment. You can see the mark here on where I striked it. So just hit in the back, and you should be able to get it out. This is typically an easy one. It's not too difficult to do. So I'm just going to probably just to wipe down with a rag or something all the rust on the splines, and then we're probably going to put some grease later. I usually use petroleum jelly. So I'm still waiting for the new axle to show up, and hopefully I can show the installation. I like to use petroleum jelly on the splines. It's perfectly safe. It's petroleum based, so if it does get in the transmission, it's perfectly safe. It's just going to dissolve with the fluid. Once again, it's a petroleum based, so it's compatible with all of the fluids and the oils inside vehicles, so there shouldn't be any issues. Now, I haven't replaced axles on this specific vehicle, but this is why you need to do a little bit of trial and error. If one technique does not work, then you try a different technique. Now, in the majority of cases, these two tuning forks, the axle popper tools, they usually work a majority of cases, but in some cases they may not work. The same with the pry bar technique. In some cases, the pry bar may not work. And what usually works for me in most cases is I take a very long punch. The one that I have, I don't have it here at the moment. It's like a bearing race driver tool. It's a very long, similar like a cold chisel or something. And then if you have good access, you can place it just right behind the axle, and to use a hammer and to knock it out. And more often than not, the axle should pop out. The bearing race driver tools usually is like similar to this punch or drift chisel. Is just a longer and thicker version of it, so it gives you a better surface area to punch the axle out. Now I'm doing the brakes on this, but I'm going to be leaving this on for now because this gives me a better leverage and grip to move the steering knuckle out of the way, because if I'm not holding onto anything, the caliper is not here and the rotor is not here, I'll be holding against the hub. It's easier when you have the brakes on in order to do this, because it gives you like easier leverage to push the steering knuckle out of the way when you get the new axle in. Especially when you're trying to take the axle out, it makes it easier to just to push it out of the way, and that's it. I know that earlier I removed the top nut for the ball joint. You don't need to do that. You're just going to make things harder for yourself. You just need to remove the two nuts and the one bolt, and you should be able to get the control arm free after that.
The next day.
So we got the new parts here for the axle. So I'm just going to open this up and compare the parts. Just make sure everything is the correct size and everything. This axle comes with a new axle nut with it. So it's always a good idea to use a new axle nut each time you take the old one off. I'm just gonna open this up. Just compare everything side to side. I'm not sure on what the brand is for this one. I've never heard of it before, so these guys just order the parts and I just put them in. So one thing I like to do is I like to put a little bit of the petroleum jelly on the splines of the axle. I just do it on the inboard joint. This one is an inverted style axle, so just put a little bit of petroleum jelly inside. I'm using the Vaseline brand of petroleum jelly, so it's perfectly safe because it's petroleum based, so it should not do any harm. Just around here. You don't need to put like too much, just a little bit. And then after, we're going to clean the splines on the differential or transmission side. And then later we're going to put some wheel bearing grease here afterwards. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to clean the hub off with a little bit of some brake cleaner. Just spray in the hub just to clean out any debris or dirt inside that may be in here. And just give this a wipe with a shop rag or shop towel. And also to clean the back as well. So what you want to do, you just want to give this a wipe in the back here to clean any dirt or debris. And you can also clean the wheel speed sensor if you want, if it's very dirty. So just give this a wipe. So I'm going to apply some of the wheel bearing grease. I'm just using the Valvoline stuff. I typically use the Lucas red grease, but it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you don't mix up the different types of grease. Just stick to one style. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of grease inside here, in the inside and on the outside of the splines, and also on the axle too. You want to lubricate the splines on the axle as well. Make sure it's well lubricated. It's very important to lubricate the axle because sometimes if it's dry, it may make some noise. So you want to make sure that you lubricate everything well, and so that you don't have any issues, and that if for any reason you need to remove the axle in the future, it won't get seized or stuck in the hub. So you want to make sure to spray some brake cleaner, like on a shop rag, to clean the splines on the transmission. You will notice that there is a lock ring or a C-clip here. You don't need to take this off. This clip is going to stay on there. That clip is very important because that's what's going to lock the axle in place. So we are just going to lubricate the splines a tiny bit. You may need to wash down any excess after at the very end. So I put some grease here. I'm going to wipe it off because I put a petroleum jelly on the other end. So just let me take that off. You don't want to spray brake cleaner directly in there because you'll get that inside the differential or the transmission on whatever it's connected to. I believe it's connected to the transmission on this side. It's okay. I've seen some guys use grease on this end. If you use a tiny amount, it won't do any damage really. I think it's okay to use grease because everything is all petroleum based. But one of my instructors, engine and transmission instructors from school eons ago, he told me that he uses petroleum jelly on transmission part. He uses a petroleum jelly instead of assembly lube on transmission parts. So anyhow, I'm gonna put a little bit on the splines here. You don't have to put too much because you already put some in the axle, but this will make installation and removal easier in the future. So it makes the installation easy, so it won't get stuck. And also when you need to remove the axle in the future, it will be a lot easier to remove. So we are going to install the axle now. You probably want to start, I think, by going this way. Shift this over a bit. Typically, you want to install it into the transmission first before you put it inside the hub. So just make sure you line this up first. Make sure that you get the splines all lined up. Make sure you get it all lined up onto the splines. And now it's in, almost all the way in now. Just making sure it's all the way in. Usually you will hear the C-clip lock in place. It's all the way pretty much flush with the transmission now, so we should be all good. It was a little bit tricky to get in, so what I did, I just make sure that I line it up and support it at the bottom of the inboard joint. At the same time, sometimes you have to turn it to get it to line up onto the spline, and you just need to push into the transmission like this to push inwards, and you should be able to get it in. So what's left now, we just need to pull this back and to slide it into the hub. And at the same time, you want to line up the lower ball joint studs onto the control arm at the same time. If by any chance that the inboard joint has came out, they typically call it a plunge joint. So sometimes if you're not able to line up the lower ball joint, you just need to push this inwards toward the transmission side, and it will the parts inside the joints will pop back into place. So sometimes if you can't line this up like how it is in this case, you basically have to push it towards to push the steering knuckle this way. So push like this, and you should be able to get it to line up afterwards. Make sure the axle is seated all the way in. Line up the control arm. And that's it. Axle is all the way in. Everything looks good here. We're just going to install the bolts. I'm going to place the torque specs on the screen somewhere for you guys to see. We're going to torque everything down after. We're just going to run down the nuts and bolts with an impact slightly. I'm not going to crank up the impact all the way, just to get it in snug, and then we are going to torque them after that. I have the axle nut temporarily reinstall the new axle nut. I'm just going to probably use like a 80 or 100 foot-pound torque stick, and then we are going to torque it to the proper specs after that. So we're just going to run them down. The air compressor in the background is just a temporary air compressor. We use it for the wheel alignment machine, so it's not really all like set up yet. We have to get a new air compressor for the shop, a dedicated air compressor. So I'm just going to tighten the bolts a little bit. Just a tiny bit here, and we are going to torque it afterwards. Now we're just Going to tighten up the axle nut temporarily. Just use a 100 foot-pounds torque stick so that I don't over tighten it by accident. You just want to make sure that everything spins. I'm not reusing the brake rotor, so I'm going to be doing the brakes on this. But in case that you're not doing the brakes on your vehicle, you will need to use a brake cleaner to clean off any grease or residue that maybe have been left over on the job. I just installed a punch or a drift, a chisel here. You just need to insert something inside the vents to stop the rotor from moving. The torque spec on this is 242 foot-pounds, and to me that's quite a bit. That's like almost the whole range of my torque wrench. This torque wrench goes up to 250 foot-pounds. This is going to be 242. Just making sure everything is good. If you want, after you have the wheels on, you can torque this on the ground if you want to. It's something that you should do, but I don't think anybody does it unless you're working on the driveway or something. But this should be sufficient enough. So 242 foot-pounds. Then we're gonna torque the lower ball joint, the nuts and bolts, which are 38 foot-pounds. But first, we are going to stake the axle nut. We're going to stake the axle nut. You can use the same punch or drift, a chisel or whatever you want to call it. Just a tiny bit, and you don't have to kill it. And I think that should be okay. Okay, that's good. You don't need to stake it too much in case you need to remove it again in the future. So it says the torque spec is 38 on this, which is not really all that much for suspension bolts. If in any case these are not the correct specs, I will put the correct specs on the screen, but I read 38 foot-pounds, so that should be the correct spec. It seems a little low to me in my personal opinion, but every vehicle is different. So after you're done, just double check your work. Make sure everything spins and looks good. There isn't anything loose. And then I think you should be all good to go after that. This is already inside the transmission, so this is not going anywhere. Just need to wash down the area, any excess grease, and then that's it. So that's it for this video. That's all you need to know for replacing the passenger's side axle, and that's it. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber, and please don't forget to hit that bell notification, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good day and take care.